Stars go through a natural cycle, much like any living beings. This cycle begins with birth, expands through a lifespan characterized by change and growth, and ultimately leads to death. The time frame in the life cycle of stars is entirely different from the life cycle of a living being, lasting in the order of billions of years. Now, let us discuss the life cycle of stars and its different stages.
Good day, students. I am teacher Rona. How are you all today? Okay, good to hear that. So, our topic for today is all about the life cycle of a star. So, as you can see here in our diorama, there are different stages of how a star were formed. From nebula, dust cloud, globule, protostar, brown dwarf, main sequence star, red giant, white dwarf, black dwarf, of course, supernova, neutron star, and last, the black hole. So, the first stage in the life cycle of a star is the giant gas cloud. So, a star originates from a large cloud of gas. A temperature inside the cloud is low enough for the synthesis of the molecules. A nebula is a giant cloud of dust and gas in space. Some nebulae come from the gas and dust thrown out by the explosion of a dying star. So nebula, dust cloud, and globule is under this stage.
So hello, I'm teacher Monica, and now let's proceed to the second stage of the life cycle of a star, which is the protostar. So protostar is an early stage in the evolution of a star that usually grows to the point of beginning nuclear fusion and becoming a star by gathering mass. So what are protostars made of? It is made of a contracting cloud of cold and dark interstellar medium, mostly hydrogen gases. How it is formed? It is formed as gravity begins to pull the gases together into a ball. So this process is known as accretion. As gravity pulls the gases closer to the center of the ball, gravitational energy begins to hit them, causing the gases to emit radiation. And this radiation simply escapes into space. A protostar looks like a star, but its core is not yet hot enough for fusion to take place. It needs to reach 10 million Kelvin so that hydrogen fusion will work efficiently. If it does not meet this certain temperature, these result in failed star or the what we call brown dwarf.
So, I am teacher Jelena and I am here to discuss the third phase or the third stage of the life cycle of star, which is the T-Tauri phase. So, when we say T-Tauri phase, it starts when the materials stop flowing to the protostars and it releases a tremendous amount of energy. The mean temperature of the Tauri star isn't enough to support nuclear fusion at its core. The T-Tauri star lasts for about 100 million years, following which it enters the most extended phase of development, which is the main sequence phase.
Hello everyone, I'm teacher Jamika and we are going to proceed to the fourth stage of the life cycle of the star. So the fourth stage is the main sequence. Main sequence phase is the stage of the development where the core reaches the point for fusion to commence. In this process, the hydrogen atoms are converted into the atoms of helium.
So in this stage, exothermic reaction occurs wherein it gives off more heat than it requires. And if we are going to look into the reality, the core of the main sequence star releases a tremendous amount of energy.
So furthermore, the life of the main sequence star depends on how massive it is. A higher mass star may have more materials, but it burns through it faster because of the higher core temperature caused by the greater gravitational forces.
Good day everyone, I am teacher Boyet, and now let us going to move on to the next stage, which is the fifth stage. As we all know, star's life is generally dependent on its fuel. star converts hydrogen atoms into helium over scores of life at its core. Eventually, hydrogen fuel runs out and the internal reaction began to stop. Without the reaction occurring on its core, the star contracts inward through gravity. Eventually, the hydrogen fuel runs out and the internal reaction began to stop. Without the reaction occurring at the core, a star contracts inward through gravity, causing it to expand. As it expands, the star became a subgiant star and then a red giant. During the stage, there is a probability that the star will move on to its next phase of the life cycle or not. If the star eventually collapses after it runs out of fuel, it would transform into a white dwarf and eventually became a black dwarf if it was totally runs out of fuel. Black dwarf is also known as the dead star, which is no longer shining nor hot. On the other hand, if the star is large enough to become a supergiant star, it would be able to move on to its next phase, which is the supernova.
And finally, we arrive at the last stage, which is the supernovae and planetary nebulae. Supernovae is the death of a massive star, while planetary nebulae is born when a low-mass star, less than around 8 times the Sun, dies. So under this is the neutron star and black hole. A neutron star is the collapsed core of a massive supergiant star. And the gravity of this is about 2 billion times stronger than gravity on Earth. In fact, it's strong enough to significantly bend radiation from the star in a process known as gravitational lensing. On the other hand, a black hole is a region of space-time where gravity is so strong that nothing, no particles or even electromagnetic radiation, such as light, can escape from it. So, black holes are formed when the center of a very massive star collapses in upon itself.
Before we end our presentation, let's have a short recap about on how stars are formed. So the first stage in the life cycle of the star is the giant gas cloud. Giant gas cloud are giant clouds of dust and gas in the space. Nebula, dust cloud, and globule are under this stage. Second stage, the protostar. Protostar is an early stage in the evolution of a star that grows to the point of beginning nuclear fusion and becomes a star when it gathers mass. Third stage, the T Tauri phase. T Tauri is the phase wherein the materials stop flowing into the protostar and release a tremendous amount of energy. Fourth stage, the main sequence stage. The main sequence phase is the stage where the core temperature reaches the point for the fusion to commence and hydrogen atoms are converted into atoms of helium. Fifth stage, the red giant. Red giant is the stage where the star starts to run out of fuel and began to expand due to the gravity until it collapses and turns to a white dwarf. Eventually, the white dwarf will totally run out of fuel and will turn into the dead star called the black dwarf. And last but definitely not the least, the sixth stage is the supernovae and the planetary nebulae. Supernovae is the death of a massive star, while planetary nebulae is born when a low-mass star, which is less than around 8 times the mass of the Sun, dies. Neutron star is a collapsed core of a massive supergiant star, and the gravity on it is about 2 billion times stronger than on Earth. On the other hand, black holes are formed when the center of a very massive star collapses in upon itself. The gravity here is very strong that nothing, even light, can escape from it.